Hold on, I'm taking a sip of water. I'm not even gonna get to the first sentence. You're not even you're already laughing? Fuck off.
You are listening to Rift Overcast.
It's our game. Not the one we made, it's the one we play.
The team here plays the game a lot.
We really think differently about MMOs than what a lot of people do.
Our game isn't the game it was a year ago.
This game changes all the time. Since launch, we've been non-stop planning on what to do next.
It's all about listening to the players.
Hello everyone and welcome to Rift Overcast. My name is Joe and with me as always is Matt.
Sup?
Thanks for that. On to the poll results for this week. Question, what do you think are the most likely additions coming to Rift in patch 1.9? Choices were Arena, Raid Warfronts, Third Faction, Persistent Open World PvP. 10 voted for Arena, 3 were for Raid Warfronts, 11 for Third Faction, and 10 for Persistent Open World PvP. Well, almost everyone, or I should say almost the majority of the people voted for what we actually got in this patch, or will be getting in this patch.
They were pretty close with the voting. I agree.
You always add so many good things to this show, Matt.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm watching the Ranger game.
On to the announcements. We're still looking for players interested in streaming Rift content on a schedule for Overcast Twitch channel. If you're interested, simply contact us with your PC specs, what you want to stream, and your availability. Those interested should be comfortable speaking to a wide audience and willing to actively interact with live chat. First thing we're talking about today is Conquest is in, as we had laid out a short episode. What was it, this past Thursday, Matt? Or was it? Yeah, it had to be Thursday.
Yeah, I think it was Thursday.
Anyway, it's only the first wave of testing. Tryon has already said that they plan to do multiple phases in the coming weeks. Obviously, we don't know exactly how that schedule will lay out. Could be multiple testing in 1 week or whatever the case may be. Testing was scheduled for 4 p.m. Pacific, or 7 for me and Matt, since we play on Eastern Time. But didn't actually get started till about an hour and a half, 90 minutes after when they actually planned to do so, about 5:30 Pacific Time. Can't blame Tryon too much. There was probably an insane amount of people wanting to play. I wonder if the demand was one of the reasons that it got pushed back.
Yeah, I can see the demand having a definite impact on the server stability for sure.
Moving on, the Conquest was turned on and off multiple times throughout the phase, mainly because things weren't working properly, which is to be expected with something released like this. And honestly, we don't know how much internal testing was done before it was released. So as far as we know, this could have been the very first or very preliminary testing, and therefore that is the reason for the multiple failures of the mechanics and whatnot. But due to this, here at Overcast, neither one of us got much significant test time in, so our promised episode of pretty much doing an entirely dedicated episode to Conquest will be delayed till we're hoping for next week. Whenever they do the next testing, that basically will dictate when our next episode will come in, and MythBlaze will be here to comment and add his opinion on the entire situation. Anything else to comment on that?
No. No, I'm just, I'm good. Yeah.
There was a lot of confusion about what the objectives were, the crafting that takes place in the Conquest, and overall just the entire Conquest as a whole. So not much really to report just yet. Like we said, once further testing commences, that's when our episode will be dedicated to this, and anything you need or want to know about that, this new form of PvP implemented will be here on the show. If you did get the test, then please be sure to participate in the feedback thread on the PTS forum. Obviously, despite me and Matt joking right now, because we're just like that, we want as much feedback on this, and we want people to make this as strong and good as possible, obviously.
Who's joking? I'm not joking. I don't know why I'm talking. I don't know why I'm talking in such a deep voice. You don't even have a deep voice. Maybe it's kind of. I know you're a really tall dude, and so I thought a deeper voice would be. Okay, never mind. Continue. Go ahead. It's all yours.
Matt's just a retard. Anyway.
See, you said See, that's how
I was doing an impression of you.
But I don't do that.
Whatever. Elrond confirms the silver portal for Primeval Feast appears in Droughtlands, though Primeval Feast is still unavailable on the current PTS, which honestly is a too much of a surprise. I'm still laughing at the people. I think it was like 2 weeks ago when the initial achievement for it was popped up on the PTS. People were running around the entire world looking for the sliver, even though neither of the two previous slivers, when they were put on the PTS as an achievement, were accessible. So why would they think anything would be different with this sliver? I do not know.
Yeah, it's like, interesting
We're
that.
gonna cut out that entire segment. Yes.
No, we're
Voodoo,
not. It's no, hold on. I was gonna say it is actually interesting that Primeval Feast is going to show up in the Droughtlands because it's going to be a life-based, or it's supposed to be a life. It looks like it's going to be a life-based instance because it's all life-based bosses in there. But it's showing up in Droughtlands, which is all like
desert. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all desert. It's all fire and earth.
Maybe it's going to be like because people have been saying that it's reviving previous bosses that have already been killed, so it has to be some sort of time gap or something, whether it ports us into the future, though the past would obviously make more sense. So maybe in the past, Droughtlands was like, filled with plants and stuff, and it just massive fire killed everything.
You know what? That's awesome. You're ingenious, actually. That's probably exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be like the story of what happened, like why Droughtlands looks the way it does. It's going to probably be an alternate Droughtlands where there is lots of life in there.
Well, then I'm going to want to play that Droughtlands. Forget the desert. Anyway, Voodoo, as many people know, one of the longest tenured competitive raiding guilds, is calling it quits. There's a lot of speculation as to why and exactly they're doing this. There was actually a thread on Unknown Champions under the Rift section about this, and the main thing people are guessing is that, and even it's one of the Voodoo members themselves actually come out and said specifically that a lot of their members were already, before ID had come out, getting bored with the game, looking for other games that are coming out, which you can only assume has to be either Diablo 3 or Guild Wars 2, because honestly there's nothing really else on the horizon that's that big. Maybe the Secret World, but... And then when ID came out, Laethys' difficulty might have played a small part in that, and I think that they definitely had some people who wanted to stick around, but they were hemorrhaging so many members that to recruit that all back, it just wasn't worth the effort. I think that the people that do stick around will probably just, go off and go to separate guilds and all split up. But regardless of that, it's kind of sad, honestly, to see a top-end guild like that.
It's not the first time that we've seen a top-end guild split up because of... we lost a lot of guilds. There used to be a lot more guilds that were all competing with each other for World First and Server First and such. When Hammernell came out, but Hammernell came out just so strong, it was just so difficult that a lot of those guilds just split up, just gave up, split up. Some of them trickled out elsewhere, and I think a lot of those people, I think it's just the nature. When you're used to raiding with a certain group for a certain amount of time, there's not a lot of interest, really, to go elsewhere. Like, same problem that we're having, really, to be honest, is it's difficult to settle into a brand new group. And there really isn't a lot of groups that can keep up with the kind of dedication and pace that, like, the top three have for raiding this content, So anywhere else that they would go after Voodoo is going to be a step down for them.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that. I think it's also just the nature of hardcore raiding. When you're, like you said, you're that dedicated, I think you burn yourself out. And I think it's one of the reasons me and you, there's as much fun we had with, BC and WoW and anything else to that extent, we burned ourselves out to an extent. So we, now, as much as we want to, progress and stuff like that nature, we don't want to raid 4 times a week. It burns you out and it makes you honestly like the game less and less because it becomes so monotonous, to be honest.
Yeah, anyway. I can see that. I don't know if I ever really felt the burnout raiding, to be perfectly honest. A couple of times when we were raiding during Wrath, when I was raiding with our old crew during Wrath of the Lich King, and we were doing 4 or 5 nights a week, the only burnout that I ever felt was that sometimes I would want to go out and do something else one night, And it's not that I was bored doing the content again or playing the game. It's simply that I was like, we've done 4 nights in a row. I think I'd just like to go see a movie tonight. But then if I do that, then you've got 24 people out of 25, so couldn't do that.
Oh,
so
yeah,
it's the dedicated time that kind of gets in the way. But I still don't think, I've said this before, I don't think Rift really needs that much dedicated time, especially considering that everything before Laethys appears to be pretty damn easy. assuming that you're geared for that content. So you don't need that much time to go through it. And currently, Infernal Dawn is the only raid of its tier too. So it's not like there's Infernal Dawn and Primeval Feast to go through. Primeval Feast isn't out yet.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Speaking of Laethys, many guilds, like you were just explaining with difficulty, are reporting that Laethys is too hard. Is kind of an understatement. Even Voodoo themselves is reporting that it's 100% impossible. But I'm not sure if any of those results are after the recent hotfix. I believe hotfix was yesterday. Could be wrong about that.
It was either yesterday, which would have been Thursday this week, or it was either Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah, which increased the enraged timer, which I had actually read from, I believe it was Tyrion of Voodoo, it might have been Slipmat, that the enraged timer that went on live was actually a minute or two shorter than it was on the PTS, which of course is kind of stupid because people were already having tremendous amount of difficulty on the PTS, and then once they reduced the enraged timer to what it is now, you pretty much can't have a single person die from what I've been reading, and even with that, and people in Voodoo have the best gear possible, period, they still were not being able to beat the DPS checks, which is why one of the hotfixes, and probably the biggest one, is they increased the enraged timer, so you have longer to DPS down the boss.
Yeah, I wish there was more videos of better progression on Laethys. There have been several live streams on Twitch, several people that are currently live streaming their Infernal Dawn progression, and a couple of guilds that are working on Laethys. But it's hard to tell, everything that's going on there, and they're not really talking about the mechanics much, on the streams and whatnot. So yeah, so it's hard to follow the fight. It's hard to see if it's just the enraged timer. I'd be very curious to find out. Maybe one of the listeners can clarify this. I'm going to continue to look too. Maybe we can clarify this next week. But it's difficult to say if it's just the enraged timer that's given people so much difficulty with Laethys.
I believe there was a couple of mechanics that are a little too punishing, but I think that with the decrease in rage time, or increase, I should say, you might see people start downing him. But at the very least, you're not going to see any middle of the road guild downing it anytime soon, from what I can tell. You're going to have, top end, absolute, top tier guilds are still going to be the people who are downing this. I don't know if anyone lesser than that is going to be downing anytime soon. But like I said, we don't know any of those results were after the recent hotfix. So next week we'll probably get a better indication, or inclination, I should say, of, how hard or how easy the bosses become. I doubt it's really become easy, though. They might actually have to continue to do small hotfixes like this. But regardless of that, because of this hotfix and because of the response to Laethys, this does put Trine in a pretty difficult spot, because they either delay a nerf, keep it hard, especially they almost might want to keep it hard specifically because of the beginning of ID was hammered for how easy it was, or they nerf it, almost over nerfing it, and people will want to look elsewhere for a challenge, because let's be honest, the majority of the people who raid in this game specifically do so because it's harder than any other game that's currently out.
Well, yeah, that's been Rift's reputation. That's kind of like where Rift's place is in the MMO genre right now, is that Rift is the place that you go to for the hardest raid content, because as many fans of Rift PvP as we have, PvP definitely isn't the gem that brings you to Rift, It's like the soul system and the raiding and the end game, the content release schedule of that end game content. And granted that there's umpteen reasons to play Rift, but it's definitely kind of the signature of the game that if you're playing Rift and you're raiding in Rift, it's because, you chose Rift for your raiding because Rift has the hardest raids. It always has. I think even Infernal Dawn is at least on par with, for example, Dragon Soul, hard mode Dragon Soul in current World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's any easier than that. The one thing, and me and you had talked about this in the past, is that we didn't want gating, forced gating, essentially. We wanted natural gating, so it's kind of, at least for us too, kind of upsetting to see people so upset with something that's basically natural gating. You want something to be hard and be almost like a brick wall that you have to push through. Whether or not it literally is a brick wall and it's impenetrable, or there is some way to down it, has yet to be seen, and we have to see what happens after the hotfix, like I mentioned a couple of times. But I think,
well, you have to wonder how much of the ID gear these guys have farmed out. I mean, they raid every night of the week, 5-6 nights out of the week. These top guilds like Voodoo and Special Olympics and Maximation. This is their full-time job, is doing raiding at night like this. So they've got to have a pretty good amount of gear, but I'm curious how much gear they actually do have. Because really, I mean, this is what we wanted, right? Everybody was complaining that Infernal Dawn was too easy. Now we hit Laethys, and boom, it's a brick wall. It's been on the forums, and it's been discussed on the forums that there's no natural gating in Infernal Dawn, and that people miss that. You know, people like, a lot of the people who enjoy raiding enjoy the sort of natural gating, and by natural gating, we mean when you run into a boss that, you know, you started the raid on boss number 1 with the gear that you had from the previous tier of content. You kill boss number 1, you kill 2, you kill number 3, then you get to number 4, and all of a sudden the gear that you have just isn't good enough to kill number 4. So you have to go back, and you have to farm out bosses 1, 2, and 3 until you have enough gear to kill 4 again. That's a natural gate. And I think Laethys could just be a natural gate. You know, we haven't gone up against Laethys. We haven't actually experienced this encounter. So I'm not saying that that's all it is. It's very possible Laethys could be just simply 100% impossible. And if anybody knows, it would be a top guild like Voodoo or Maximation or Special Olympics. So if Voodoo says it, then it's probably not far off. It could probably use some tuning. But I mean, do we really want to see Laethys tuned to where you can kill Laethys with full HK gear?
I sure don't want that. And it's funny because I was actually reading that previous encounters have been tuned up, which I saw in numerous hotfixes. The only encounter that still hasn't been tuned up, which were previously undertuned, that's why they were so easy, is Conclave, which I believe is the first boss in the entire place. Could be wrong about that.
No, the Ember Conclave is the third boss. It goes War Boss, then it's a Tuziel, and then it's the Ember Conclave.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. So, yeah, from what I've been reading, the other encounters have been tuned up to a satisfactory level. They might not still quite be, what we assumed they were going to be when ID first came out, but they're definitely a hell of a lot harder than they were when ID was first released. But Conclave still is undertuned. Regardless of that, I think I'm in full agreement with you. I want to have to, work for downing a boss. I don't want to walk into a raid, especially a new one, not really get any gear, which I know people say, oh, it's all for the team aspect. Gear has no influence. I think that's completely, full of it, honestly. I have tremendous amount of fun when I play with multiple people, and especially when you're friends with them, the entire camaraderie of it. But at the end of the day, I still want gear. If I did all the stuff and I got 0 gear, I think that'd be a big disappointment, honestly. So having to go back and clear those previous bosses to get gear, essentially, and then push through it, I couldn't be happier with that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking too, I wonder if the frustrations with Laethys could stem out of how much these hardcore guilds are raiding. Because if you're raiding 5-6 nights a week, and you can clear all the previous content, even up to, even including the hard mode Ember Conclave, then you're probably going to clear that content in 2 nights, or maybe all in 1 night at this point. I think ID, it's been out for what, 3 weeks now, right? I think we're in the 3rd week for it. So after 3 weeks of it, yeah, you could probably do at least, if you're doing 5 nights a week and you've made the progress and you've cleared both Earth and Fire Wings, you could probably at the very least clear Fire Wing 1 night, clear the Earth Wing another night, and then if you raid 5 nights a week, you've got 3 other nights to fill with what? Obviously, you're going to fill that with Laethys. So these guilds are going and beating their heads against the boss that they're not ready for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's, I think if the boss was deeper into the raid, like an Achilles type, where it's at the end of the raid, they wouldn't care as much because they would be clearing so many more bosses during the week. So number 1, they'd have less time to dedicate towards that boss, and number 2, they'd be getting more gear along the way, probably making the encounter easier than what it is currently.
Yeah, when it comes to Hammernell, there's 10 other bosses. 10! Before you fight Achilles. So that's plenty, and granted, yes, the hardcore guilds could get HK down to a 1 to 2 night clear easy. Most of them had it down to 1 night clear, actually by the time I would say, right before the nerf started coming out. They were clearing, 1 through 10 in a night, and then do Achilles on the following night. Or maybe even get a couple attempts in on Achilles, on that 1 night. But yeah, it's, like you said, you have 10 other bosses to do, so there's enough bosses, there's enough content to fill out your massive raid schedule, and in Infernal Dawn there just isn't, because the initial bosses for each wing are easy enough that it takes no time to go through them at all. So they want to raid these 5 nights a week, but they don't have the content to fill it in, so that then they're bashing their heads against stuff that they're not ready for. And like I said, it's very possible Laethys needs to be tuned down. I don't think she should be easy. I don't think there's enough bosses in Infernal Dawn for the dragons to be easy enough. I mean, I think you should pretty much have almost a complete ID set to be able to finish Laethys. And what does this mean for Mailforge, too, right? If Laethys is this difficult, what's going to happen to Mailforge?
Yeah, I almost wonder if the reaction to Laethys will have any impact on how they handle Mailforge. They might do last-minute changes strictly because of the reaction to this boss.
That's a good point, because, I mean, Mailforge isn't available yet, and I don't believe that we've seen any announcements. They haven't said when we're going to see Mailforge yet, either, because the last we heard was Mailforge was going to be unlocked when he was ready, and he just wasn't ready yet. They were still tuning him, and they were still testing stuff and working out bugs and whatnot. But that's a good point. It makes you wonder. They're going to bring Laethys down to a level where you can kill her, and they're probably going to do it very slow, and they're probably going to be very careful about it, not to over nerf it. I think it's not being a fanboy to actually just trust and have faith that Tryon will take it slow. I understand that guilds are very anxious to kill Laethys, but it's a sensitive thing. It needs to be done right, because once you nerf Laethys too far, there's no going back. It's like cutting your hair. It's like once you chop it all off, that's it. It's gone.
In any event, I think this is
not troll hair. I know that's what you were thinking, because I said hair. It has nothing to do with that. Once you cut off all your troll hair, it's all gone.
Well, yeah, because their hair doesn't even grow back. But anyway, in any event, I believe, I was saying before, this is a wait-and-see game. You gotta wait to see how the new hotfix impacts it, and like you said, after that, even if that's not enough, you gotta see if they do more incremental nerfs, or maybe they do it too severe of a nerf. I, like you, have trust in Tryon, but I wouldn't be blown away if they did something like that. To more stuff that are currently on the PTS. There were 6 new zones that were listed in the achievement window. Eternal City, Dusk Conspires, I don't even know how to pronounce that third one. You can do it for me.
Peliadane.
Yeah.
Peliadane.
Peliadane.
No, I think it's Pelia. I think that sounds better. Peliadane. We'll call it Peliadane.
Then Ceratos, Morbin,
Peliadane.
and Steps of Infinity. However you want to pronounce it, our speculation is that this has to be in either some massive update or an expansion of some sort, because unless these zones are so small, I don't understand how they could implement 6 zones without being, something, big being around it, whether it's an expansion or some special reason for doing such a massive update.
Yeah, I mean, each of these zones are listed on their own individual tab, just like Shimmer Sand, Iron Pine Peak, Gloamwood, whatever. They all have their individual achievement tab, so it's not like these are 6 areas of one zone. You know what I mean? It's not like we're talking about like the different sections of Ember Isle or something. These are 6 fully flushed out zones, or at least they're going to be. We don't know what they look like. We don't really know anything about them. There isn't even any achievements listed for these zones yet. There's just the names there on the list of the tabs on the left side of the achievement UI. But I mean, with 6 zones, we're talking about expansion content. That's a lot of stuff. 6 zones? What are you going to do in them? I mean, you have to wonder, is this going to be like 6 Ember Isles all at once, where it's just going to be leveling up Planar Attunement Tier 3? Is that all we're going to get? I mean, they haven't released Planar Attunement Tier 3 yet, right? So we're going to have to see that soon, because 6 zones, man? I mean, 6 zones worth of questing? I'm thinking level increase.
That's fair assumption. I even think that they could be possibly adding, more alternatives to while you're leveling. They could, I don't know, add another starter zone, because there was a huge complaint pretty much since launch that there was only one starter zone per faction. People didn't like that. There's so many different, reasons or how they'll use or utilize these zones. It's kind of insane to think.
Well, it could be good, but it would also be disappointing, because it's not endgame, and I understand that we need to draw in new players, and I understand that the leveling process, it should be made more fun. I think the history of MMOs, too often do they create the starting content and the leveling content, and then they don't touch it. It's like, it's there, and that's what gets you to the cap, and that's the only purpose that content serves, is to get you to the end game. And Tryon's done a pretty good job, and they're adding in new. We'll get to this later, but they're adding in new instant adventures for Silverwood and Free March and so on. And they've said they're going to do instant adventure for all the zones so that it's across the board and you can essentially like level through instant adventure. So they obviously are concerned about the quality of the leveling process, and they want to continue to improve it and develop it just as much as they improve and develop the rest of the game, which is excellent. But to say that 6 new zones are going to be just starter zones, like new starting zones, that seems like a bit much, you know what I mean? Because this is an exciting thing to think that there's going to be like, that could easily be a whole continent right there. 6 zones. Because how many zones do we have total on live right now?
Do I have to do that kind of math? Come on.
Well, simple addition, Joe. It's 1 plus 1. You just do it over and over again. Let's see. We've got
So 11 right there. 1 plus 1.
we got Silverwood, Gloomwood. Okay, I'm not going to do it.
You could do like per faction. You don't have to do both factions because that'd be stupid. So
Okay, well, there's Silverwood, Gloomwood, Scarwood. Scarlet Gorge. I skipped Scarlet Gorge. Iron Pine. Droughtlands, right? Stillmore, Shimmer Sand, that's 9. So there's at least 10.
Yeah, and we assume that the level
10 or
increase is going to be 5-10 levels at most, so obviously you wouldn't need 10 zones. I hope it's only 5 levels, honestly. I think WoW learned its lesson with the first couple expansions, despite me loving Burning Crusade. It was just, it's unneeded to have to level 10 times. Like, what's the point? And not to mention, I think it also preserves the game. Because one thing that WoW learned was that if they kept doing 10 levels at a time, eventually you're going to have like level 90. And as funny as it sounds, people who join the game, they almost get deterred to have to think like, oh, I have to do 1 to 70 or 1 to 80. Like, if you keep it at 55, it almost sounds like subconsciously more pleasing.
Well, I mean, WoW has been out for, I think, 8 years, right? So if Tryon raised... Is it 8 years?
This November will be 8 years.
Okay. Well, let's call it 8 years because it'll be a good number for my example. So WoW's been out for 8 years, and they up until the most recent ones, they increased the level cap by 10 levels every single time, right? If we do see a level increase in Rift, it's going to be probably roughly right around the 2-year mark. And if Tryon increased the level cap by 10 levels every 2 years, let's start at level 60. Let's say they raise the level cap at the end of the year to 60. 8 years from now, that's 4 increases. That's 4 increases. So, okay, so that would be level 100. It would take 8 years to reach level 100.
Well, I mean, I understand that. But regardless of that, I think Blizzard also learned that when you make 10 levels, you have to make the gear scale up better. Because obviously, if something doesn't scale much from 72 to 76 where you're questioning, you get deterred. So I think that's why Cataclysm, as much as I hate that expansion, was one of the very first that you didn't see an absolutely insane jump, in statistics from, the previous expansion. Whereas BC or Vanilla to BC, BC to Wrath, because it was 10 levels, there was such a gigantic jump in stats across the board that, the starting point for the expansion pretty much screwed the entire expansion, that there was so much blow. I mean, I don't want to be at the point where I'm playing Rift and I'm looking at a piece like a chess piece, and one has 220 agility and the other one has 230. Like, I think that's so absurd. I don't even want to look at that.
Well, you actually make me think of something else too. I really want to know why do you even have to increase the level cap? Why do we need it? I don't see why we even need to do it, honestly, because all of the problems that come up about gear being obsoleted, and new players having to catch up, and content and raids being obsoleted, the majority of that ends up stemming out of, like, obviously at some point content is going to become obsolete, but the problems with when it becomes obsolete stems right out of a level increase. Because once we increase the level in Rift from level 50 to level 60, everybody's going to go to level 60. Nobody's going to be doing Greenscale's Blight, or River of Souls, or Hammerell, or Infernal Dawn, because those are going to be level 50 raids.
Yeah, that's true, but at the same time, people like us who are behind, it'll start a clean slate so we can stay, you know what I mean? Like, we could stick with the competition and never fall behind again. And eventually they'll catch up to the same thing where there'll be 3 or 4 raids probably, and you have to advance through all of them. But if you're at the beginning, you stay with the pace, essentially. I think you have a hard time not raising a level at all, because then people would be even further behind. Sure, you could continue to trivialize content, like, like a year down the road, Infernal Dawn could be completely trivial, like Hammerell is starting to become. But that just, why make it even longer of a process to gear? I mean, regardless of the content being trivial, we still have to do weekly raids of tier 1 content. You're going to have to do that with tier 2 and then tier 3, you know what I mean? So you might as well raise the levels and wipe the slate clean.
But Rift has an advantage in this subject because Rift has the opportunity and the means to give you gear through other methods. Because you can get gear through doing zone events and doing rifts and farming inscribed sourcestone. You can get gear through doing crafting. So really, all they would have to do, like once Greenscale's Blight and the Tier 1 stuff is just completely off the map, and you don't look at it, nobody does it, you know what I mean? And we're on like Tier 4, Tier 5 of rating. Obviously, people aren't going to want to go through Greenscale's Blight and then River of Souls and a Hammer and Infernal Dawn to get caught up to the most current tier, but all you have to do is give them a decent crafting set to build that takes some work, and you could link it to rifting, or you could just do it purely through rifting, or give you two options so that you get some stuff like maybe a weapon from doing rifts and zone events that's on par with entry level to the current tier of rating, and then you do crafting gear for the rest of the stuff. They've got new 5-mans coming out, you know what I mean? We're going to see new 5-man content, the new 5-man content, the new master modes. They can, what's to say that Master Mode has to always be the same difficulty, It could be like a 5-man rating where Master Mode Darkening Deeps and Master Mode Caduceus Rise are kind of like one tier of Master Modes. Then they release the next set of Master Modes, and those are on par with like entry-level gear for the newest raid content. So there's so many different ways for Rift to get a new player caught up without making them have to go through 5 tiers of previous content that I don't think they need to increase the level cap.
Well, if they made that successful, and it worked flawlessly, I'd be all for it. Because, as you know, I despise leveling. It's like, it's one of the reasons that as cool as Guild Wars sounds, I still don't know if I could ever get a max level in that game, despite them making the levels extremely close. Like, each level, the XP required to level doesn't really increase really at all. But despite that, it's just such a long process. And I know in Guild Wars is trying to make it so that even at a low level, you feel like you're doing endgame. But leveling is just, I always look at it as a burden and like an obstacle to get over, Like being max level is where things should be at, like period. And if I made an MMO, I would probably make it so that you just start at max level. But regardless,
you wouldn't enjoy that. Well, hold on, because you wouldn't enjoy that though. I don't think anybody would really enjoy just loading in and starting at max level.
Well, you know what then?
Part of the MMORPG, the draw to it is the feeling of progressing your character, and that's what the leveling process is about. And people complain about the leveling experience and the leveling process, and not liking that they have to do that to actually get to the end game content. But seriously, what are you more likely to play? A game where it's bearable and maybe even mildly interesting to do the leveling process, then you reach an end game that is just full of great content. That would feel great to me. That would be my preference. Or would you rather a game where you log in and everybody's the same level and you just start going for gear, like right off the bat?
Well, you know what? If I'm in an MMO, I retract my statement. I would make it so that leveling wasn't questing. I would make it almost like how Diablo is set up, where there's a campaign, and the game would be pretty lengthy, probably like 20, 30 hours. And that's how you felt progression. It would always be like playing a one-player game, and then once you hit max level, you almost like then go into multiplayer phase, and that's when you're max level and doing all the raids and whatnot. That would be like perfection. But that's me though.
Well, I've always said that I think that the leveling process would be a lot more fun if there was story to it. Not just story, but like, not like I read the story, or even not like I click on some funky looking dude and he gives me some bullshit dialogue about why the force is being disrupted in some cave, not referencing any specific game. That's not enough for me. I don't want to just be told the story. I don't want to have to read the story. You want to experience the story, And if you read the different steps of the epic quest chains, like the Life Saga and Saga of the Endless and the Water Saga and the new Fire one, the story's pretty cool, But now if they actually gave you like an active role where each step that you were doing was a quest that wasn't like you do this quest in 5 minutes by going out and collecting 10 mushrooms for so-and-so hero because, hey, he just got out of prison and he's fucking hungry. Bring him mushrooms. Or go kill 10 spiders because they're bothering some dude's pigs. That has no place in the story. It should be like a quest that will just last, where like this one quest, this one thing, has you, I don't know, traversing the world, searching for hidden artifacts, solving puzzles, and it's all part of one long quest objective, that can just stem out through like, a couple days, and either each time you complete an objective you get some experience, or you complete the whole thing and it's like, here, have a level.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't dispute that, and that would almost resemble a single player experience because it would feel epic in scope, and it would feel more like fulfilling. It wouldn't be so like void and empty, like go kill 12 pigs. Um,
But well, as cool as that would be, I mean, we know. Let's be honest. We know that that's not what we're going to get in Rift. I don't think we're ever going to see anything that in depth. Tryon might improve on their questing model, especially if they do in fact intend to increase our level cap. Then I really hope that they do, because I don't want to show up at Dusk and Spires or Pilidane,
just go while you're behind it.
Ceratos, Moorband, whatever. I don't want to show up in one of these new zones and some dude's like, "Hey, I remember you from Free March, man. You saved my pigs. My dog is gone. He ran into the woods. Can you go find him?" And then it's like some bullshit escort quest, and it takes like 20 minutes to like escort this injured dog back to the farm or something. I don't want to see that shit in the new zone. So hopefully they do improve the quest model, but I don't think we're going to see anything as in depth as we were just talking about.
On that note, really quickly, I just want to almost send out a message to every developer that ever makes video games.
Warning. Warning. Joe's about to go on a long rant about escort quests. If you are easily offended, please escort yourself away from the computer.
Especially
Oh
MMOs.
god, here we go.
Escort quests, remove them entirely. They are the worst experience. I don't mean like experience, like I got 12 experience. I mean experience like I want to kill myself because it's so aggravating and irritating to do them ever invented. Because not only is the AI on the NPC that you're escorting always so absolutely retarded, but the quest is so trivial and dumb. It's like, escort this guy from this side to that side when he can easily, mount up and go around. Or they go painfully slow, which makes no sense. Like, why is he walking so slow? And the main thing that absolutely kills me in escorts is you'll be escorting an NPC, and you'll start, you'll see something up the road that you want to clear preemptively so that, he doesn't get killed by it. The NPC will therefore react to it, run up to that mob, help you kill it, and then instead of continuing on, goes backwards and resets to its location it was before or prior to
where was I?
aggroing.
Oh, I was a mile back? Okay, I'll be right there.
It is so stupid and so
You know what's
retarded.
funny? This reminds me of the worst escort quest that I have ever done in my life in any MMORPG. And I'm almost embarrassed even to say that I played this game. You know what game it is? Can you guess?
Ion?
No. No, it was a LODs. A LODs Online, that free-to-play WoW clone game. Which didn't look too bad for a free option. We were so burnt on WoW, so we gave it a shot. We played a LODs Online to like level 8 or 10, at which point they were basically like, buy experience potions or don't go anywhere. Oh, and you can only play for 3 hours a day, and we're like, screw off.
Well, that and in I think it was closed beta, there was like double XP. So we're like, wow, this leveling isn't that bad. And then open beta, which in free to play is essentially release.
It was horrible.
It was twice. It was all that was removed, so it was painfully slow to level. We were like level 10. It took us like 3 days. We're like, yeah, not playing this.
So, anyways, I did an escort quest in a LODs Online that there were like goblins or something that were going to come kill this guy, and you had to save his life and escort him back to camp. Right, typical escort type background, whatever. So you start escorting this guy, and apparently he is like some kind of gardener or florist or something like that, because he stops to pick flowers along the way, and that's when these freaking goblins would attack. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, you just gave me this quest background of how urgent it is to get this guy back to the camp safely, and he wants to stop to pick flowers. Are you kidding?
I don't understand their mindset when they make those, because they're always so predictable and stupid. They always do something like, pick flowers, or hold on, I have to like gather. There was one escort in WoW where the guy was like weak, and like every like 2 minutes he would stop and be like, I'm weak, hold on a second, go on one knee, and you had to protect them. And they're so like predictable. There was one where I remember the guy would pass out from exhaustion, and you had like a water thing. You had to basically throw water on him to wake him up.
I remember that one. I thought that one was kind of funny, actually.
It was funny, but it was still in the same, vein. Like, they all operate the same way. There's no creativity to any of these. They're all made the same way with the dumbest AI, which is probably the most frustrating thing. Because if the AI was more intelligent, it would probably be more tolerable. But But regardless of that, even if all that was fixed, they aren't enjoyable to begin with. I mean, I'd rather kill 10 pigs. I really would. These escort quests are just so stupid.
You know,
But
I
anyway.
remember playing. I remember playing it. I know that we've been on this like way too long already, but whatever. It's actually a really good discussion because I remember playing Rift Beta, and I started on Defiant side, and I was playing a Kalari mage, and I came up to, I forget the name of the outpost, but it's an outpost in Free March where you had to eat these cheeses inside of a certain time, and each chunk of cheese would take away a certain amount of your health. You could eat a smaller chunk so that you were more, could be more careful and not kill yourself on the cheese, or you could eat a much larger chunk. And when that quest first came out, I thought it was awesome because, okay, yeah, you might tell me, wow, you're bitching about rescuing some guy's dog or like killing spiders or fetching eggs for some dude from the market, but you like to eat cheese for a quest. But it was I hadn't seen a quest that kind of worked like that. It's just those kind of, a quest isn't supposed to be really something that's so unbelievably engaging, like a raid or something, that you just spend all this time on, and you're just like, that was an amazing encounter. That's not going to happen with the quest, but they should at least be somewhat interesting, where you have to think a little bit about it, and that's why I liked the cheese quest. And then after the cheese quest, which, by the way, when you beat it, you got an achievement called Achievement, which I thought was awesome. There was also a race that you could do, that they put all these traps around in your path, and if you hit the bear trap, it would root you in place, and the NPC would pass you, and you had to run to each of these flags and click the flag. Quests like that, I really like those. If there was more stuff that was thought out like that in Rift, then I would enjoy the leveling process, and if they increase the level cap, I'll enjoy the new zones a lot more. If I see more stuff like that, because after Free March, I didn't really see any quests that were like that at all. They were all very typical, just collect X number this and kill X number that.
It's kind of disappointing, honestly. I mean, like you said, I don't expect anything extremely engaging, but they could put more effort into it. But regardless of all this, and back to what we were actually talking about, because like you said, we veered way off course. I'm really curious if this is indeed what we think it is. These zones are more advancement, whether it's more levels or just for more planar attunement XP, essentially. Will Tryon stick with their original plan with not charging for an expansion? Because it's kind of a hard, a fine line. You either charge money and you possibly deter people from wanting to buy it, or I think there's almost like a happy medium. You could possibly make it just cheap, like $20, $30 at most. And if people are deterred by paying $20, $30, they probably don't want to play the game much to begin with. So, I mean, losing them really, isn't that big a deal.
Well, that's the thing. It's definitely a key thing. If you're going to do a full-on retail boxed expansion and charge for it, then it shouldn't be like World of Warcraft. The original game costs the same as the subsequent expansions did. You were buying the game again every time they did an expansion. I hated that. Every time that new expansion came out when we were playing that game, I was so upset. I'm like, really? I have to pay for this thing again?
Much, but okay.
I could have sworn it was like $60 every time, or was it $40? $16.40?
The original game was $50. Only very recently did games start making, I assume the new expansion will be $60. But yeah, the vanilla WoW was $50, and every expansion after that were $40.
Point is that nobody wants to have to pay for the game again. But the other big thing too is World of Warcraft charges for its expansions. Okay, I don't want to pay for that. I never liked paying for that. We just had so many people that were playing that game and stuff, and involved in raiding, that I chose to pay so I could continue playing, because you couldn't if you didn't buy the expansion. So, but with Tryon and Rift, I would be very willing to pay $20 or $30 for an expansion, because the reason why I mentioned World of Warcraft is because they didn't release content fast enough for me to feel like I was getting my money's worth when I dropped $40 on an expansion. But with Tryon, I feel very faithful and confident that if they released a $30 retail box expansion, they would put that money back into the game, and so I would be willing to pay it.
Yeah, it was almost like Blizzard was like, you want content updates? Buy this expansion. That was really what it was like, because you wouldn't, every time an expansion came out, I felt like they would put so much effort into the initial product, but then you'd have the first 3-4 months would be fun. They put in another raid, another 3-4 months. Then you'd have 6 months to a year of just, boredom, basically. They'd put another raid in eventually, but it would be so long after the fact. And then another expansion come out again, and then it'd be like, rinse, repeat, essentially.
The real question is, can Tryon afford to do this, though? You know what I mean? Because I definitely feel like they would put the money back into the game, so I think it would be worth it. I would be more than willing to support the game that I enjoy the most and pay that amount, but with something like Guild Wars 2 on the horizon where you drop the lump sum of $60 once, buy the game, and I'm sure they're going to have expansions that they're going to charge you for, but there's no sub fee, in between. So with a game like that out, how are you going to compete with that if you're charging for if you start charging for your content on top of a subscription fee? It could be a bad marketing move.
I think you could make it $10. I mean, think about it. Imagine if, I don't know, let's say there's 200,000 people playing. 10 times 200,000. I rest my case. That alone.
And what's 10 times 200,000?
2 million.
Okay. You
just...
stopped short of the resulting number, so I was like, he doesn't want to do the math.
Well, no, I just added 0. It's not that complicated. But anyway, I'm just saying, even $10 would almost feel, it'd be like paying for, what was that, Ashes or whatever thing they had a while back with the spider mount.
Yep, that's true. They have the collector's edition and the Ashes of History, which I think are $10 each.
Yeah, so there you go. It would be like that, or even if you made it like $15, $20, I think $30, like I said, is the cap. You can't go above that, or people are gonna feel, it's gonna basically be a regular expansion. I think anything between 30 and basically 10. I don't see them releasing it for $5. Honestly, is perfectly fine. People are going to get deterred, and like I said, if they're deterred from buying this, and it's like $15, then they probably don't have much interest in the game to begin with. So who really cares if they leave? I think they need the income. Honestly, I mean, me and you both want this game to grow, and I think that it's. As much as me and you think that Diablo 3 isn't going to have a huge effect, I do think we are starting now to see that Diablo 3, at the very least, is going to have about a month time where Rift has a little bit of a lull, which will probably be most people basically saying how long Diablo 3 is going to last, which both me and you both agree that we don't think it has really any longevity whatsoever, especially since I read an article recently that normal mode on the, I guess, campaign mode it's called, takes a whopping 7 hours.
That was a speed clear though, and I believe that was on like the Bantam difficulty. It wasn't even on normal.
No, it was on normal. I read the guy who wrote actually said that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was definitely on normal. And he doesn't think that the upper echelon difficulties are going to be that much more time consuming.
Well, just to clarify real quick, when we say that Diablo 3 could take, or that Rift could see a lull because of Diablo 3, we're referring not so much to the subscriptions or active subscriptions, just playtime. People are going to be probably spending a lot of more of their off time on another game such as Diablo 3 as opposed to spending their off time on the Ember Isle or doing dungeons or PvP or whatever.
People are definitely signing on to do raids and mandatory stuff, but then as soon as all their obligations are for the day are done, they go right into Diablo 3.
Which, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I really hope that it really doesn't have any significant impact of sub numbers. I don't know if it will, honestly. I don't think it'll be anything astounding, but I could see it taking maybe a very small chunk away. But like I said,
if they get Conquest out soon and they do Conquest right, everything's balanced. If it's working properly and it's interesting and it's fun and it's competitive, then I think that's gonna suck a lot of people back into using their spare time and their off time when they're not raiding, be spending it playing like Conquest.
Well, Conquest I think is even more important because of Guild Wars. We both think that or at least I think that Guild Wars is probably not coming out until very end of summer, early fall. If he came out even in Christmas time or around there in November, I wouldn't be like completely shocked. But if I were to guess right now, I'd say like September. And the biggest draw of that game, simply, is the PvP and the world versus world or RVR or whatever. And if Conquest is put in, and like you said, it's engaging, it's fun, it's interesting, people are probably going to be like, well, what else am I getting out of Guild Wars? Because, this was the entire reason I was going to it. And if I get in the game I already currently play, the only real benefit would be the no subscription. Though, like we've discussed in the past on this show, that's kind of a gimmick. Because sure, there won't be a subscription. You pay $60 for the original game. But then maybe 6 months, a year later, you pay another $40 to $60. So granted, that's probably still equals to less than a $15 a month subscription. It's pretty damn close, though.
So I found something a little interesting that I want to bring up in the description for the Nightfall faction, which is one of the 3 factions available for the new Conquest feature. There's Nightfall, Oathsworn, and Dominion are the 3. And Dominion their background is essentially that they're ascended, they're extremely powerful, and they're going to take over and rule everything because, well, they're more powerful than everybody else. Oathsworn is more interested in kind of running like a dictatorship, but like a protective dictatorship where they're going to be the protectors of Telara and they're going to rule over, but like more in a good way. And then the description for Nightfall I thought was really, really interesting because the description kind of hints on a little bit more emphasis of what a lot of people have speculated for an expansion of what's beyond the ward and the concept of traveling out to the elemental planes. Because the Nightfall seek to rid Telara of the Ascended. They feel that the Ascended are kind of like a ticking time bomb, where with all the power that we have, we're gonna we're taking a toll on the world of Telara, and we need to leave. And they're essentially gonna eliminate any Ascended who refuse to leave. Where are they gonna go? The description talks about that. They basically are going to ascend, essentially, and they're going to move on and travel the cosmos in search of their true purpose. Travel the planes. So that makes me think the description of this faction, and seeing as I believe that these are sliver factions. This whole conquest deal with these three factions is supposed to be an alternate Telara. It's an alternate reality, or perhaps a future reality. And if the Nightfall are from the future, then it stands to reason that when we catch up to that future, we could be seeing us going to the wards. So I think there's some validity now behind the thought of traveling to the elemental planes at once we kill Regulos.
And you were worried about what they would do for lore when all the drakes were gone, and dragons, what you want to call them. I told you that they could pretty much do whatever they want with this universe, and I had pure faith in them. And as cool as that sounds, I wonder if that really has any impact whatsoever on the actual conquest mode. I doubt it does. But like you said, it definitely gives us almost a precursor to what's ahead, and tells you that Primeval Feast, could be in the future, could be in the past, could be wherever. Doesn't really matter, which will definitely help the lore, because, multiple of those bosses have been killed already. And
last time I tried to figure out where Primeval Feast would take place in a timeline or an alternate universe. It just didn't work out for me, so I'm not even going to go down that road again.
We didn't mention before, though, because we were talking about the level cap increase, whether they do it, whether they're not. But if they did do it, or even if they didn't, but just gave us more points, what do you think would happen to the soul system? I would assume that even if they gave us more points, they would probably add more talents, right? Because it's kind of the similar thing with WoW. WoW, when they had an expansion, they almost were forced to add further talents into the tree, because if not, then the talents almost become too overpowered, because then you could just use your excess points to go further into dual trees, and hybrids would just become out of control.
Yeah, exactly. Like think of a Paragon champion that can reach Cornered Beast and Flurry or something. You know what I mean? They have basically 2 Cornered Beasts. That would be completely absurd. Those 2 abilities, for the record, are too deep in the tree that I think even with 10 more levels, you're still not going to be able to reach them. Not both at the same time, but the amount of passives and procs and abilities that you could reach with essentially 10 more soul points to spend in your talent trees and your soul trees, yeah, the hybrids would get out of control at that point. So they would need to do something. And if you look at the layout for the talents in the soul trees, where each of the boxes are on them, there's plenty of room to add more icons to those trees without it looking too bloated. So it could add more options, and they would kind of have to do that anyways. Like, I would expect to see that anyways. More branch talents and more root abilities in the trees, because that's part of the excitement about an expansion is what are they going to do to my class? What new stuff am I getting for my class that I haven't seen before?
Well, for the record, there would be at least 13 points, assuming they do 10 levels, because remember, every 3 levels you get 2 points. So you get that at least 3 times, actually probably more. But even if we had at least 13, I could see them adding, I don't know, a 58 or a 61 point thing in each tree, something like along those lines. So that, therefore you're more enticed to go further into your current tree rather than spend in another tree and be more hybrid focused. I think it's pretty straightforward. I don't think really anything out of control is going to go on, unless Trine wants to go in a completely weird direction, which I doubt they will do. This probably is kind of like a moot point, because like you said, they'll just add more straightforward enough. The other thing coming up is the Summerfest World Event, which you had actually earlier when the first day of summer is, and coincidentally the first day of summer, which is June 20th, summer solstice is coincidentally on a Wednesday, which is really funny. That would actually work out perfectly if they actually plan on doing this.
Well, I mean, it's called Summerfest, right? And we know that we're probably going to see see Primeval Feast next. I mean, with the alternation of 10-20, 10-20 for 10-man, 20-man. For the raids, alternating like that, Primeval Feast is basically the most likely next in line for the newest raid coming out. And Atrophinius is like my favorite character in the game, and he loves to be bribed by alcohol. So what do you think is going to happen in Summerfest? I'll bet you that it's going to go right in line with Primeval Feast, and there's going to be kind of like, drinking games and that kind of drunken celebration and stuff, and that'll be right in line with the theme of Primeval Feast and Atrophinius. I mean, it's called Feast too, right? The Summerfest Feast. It's like what it's going to be like. And Summerfest, as the name suggests, very obvious, right? It's going to be a celebration of summer. June 20th lands on a Wednesday. I think that's when we're going to see it. I think we'll see Summerfest start June 20th, and then it'll go for a month, and we'll get 1.9, which would put 1.9 towards the end of July.
Just do me a favor, don't add any Atrophinius voiceovers to this recording.
Come, Wanderers, and join us for some mead.
Why not?
Because he's tired and old, okay?
He's not tired and old. He's just very drunk.
He's just tired and boring. But anyway.
It seems we have guests, lads.
It seems we have guests, lads.
That fest, like you said, would be pretty awesome if it actually wound up doing that. And honestly, the days pretty much were laid out perfectly for trying to do this. But that's pretty straightforward. Something that's not straightforward is the mentoring system, which is currently on the PTS. Me and you both are assuming it'll be on 1.9. That's obviously not confirmed or anything, but I would guess it would be. Mentoring system, for anyone who doesn't know, is pretty much bolster type system, though in Rift it doesn't work upwards, it only works downwards. So if you're at 50 and your friend is level 13, you can put yourself to any level that's, I think it's 10 and up, right?
Yeah,
and,
you have to be, I think it's actually level 11. Like, you have to be above level 10 to be able to bring because you can't bring your level below level 10, so you have to be at least level 11 to be able to drop your level.
Okay. So, like I said, you can bring it back down to your friend's level, assuming he's at least level 10, do stuff with him, and they're saying that the rewards will scale with, like, if you're at 50 and you scale down to do a silver reward event, you should get stuff that's like relevant to your actual level, which I'm hoping, because that would not only increase the participation in all events, honestly, it would also eventually, when they implement more instant adventures, like we said earlier, to lower level zones, that would be awesome, because that is actually one thing that's, me and Matt were saying, like, instant adventures now, like, once they implemented the Ember Isle ones, they kind of made a mistake, because it's the same daily to do both. And as cool as the Ember Isle is, and you might get more loot, though it's not like massive in one direction, and you might get some certain rep that you want, the fact of the matter is most people want to get their daily over, which they do 7 instant adventures, and the easiest way to do that is in Shimmer Sand and Stillmore. So if people had more options, and more people could do it, because the mentoring system, you'd probably see a hell of a lot more participation. Because as it stands right now, when I queue in a peak time, like 4 or 5 p.m. on a weekday, when people are getting home from school and whatnot, I usually get half a raid at absolute tops.
Really? I don't even get that much usually, to be honest.
Well, that's why I
get
said
maybe
tops,
3, 4, or 5 other people with me whenever I do Shimmer Sand or Stillmore. And if I go to Ember Isle, I'm either by myself or I've got one person.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said Ember Isle's cool, but in reality, they have to add another daily, or I don't know what, or they just gotta make the loop better. I mean, I think of making another daily. We talked about this in a previous episode. It makes so much more sense. You had a separate daily for the Ember Isle and one for Shimmer Sand. So that way, people who aren't as geared, people who really are fresh fit, they do the Shimmer Sand one, they get 3 stones. You make the Ember Isle one 6 stones, something like that. I'm not exactly asking for tier 1 loot here. I'm just saying it's a small bump in loot.
Well, it's the motivation of which one are you going to do. So the same thing that we were just talking about like Shimmer Sand and Stillmore IA versus Ember Isle IA is going to be, if you can get Inscribed Sourcestone from doing Silverwood IA, which is going to be infinitely easier than anything else because that's the lowest possible one that you can go to, then what's the motivation to do a Stillmore one?
Well, if you're scaling down to do Silverwood, it might proportionally be the same difficulty as Shimmer Sand, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, that depends on how they choose to scale down your gear, and if they're going to lock you out of, which I assume that they're going to, lock you out of abilities, which, by the way, is going to be a total pain in my ass, because if I scale myself down to go do a Silverwood event and I lose all my abilities, and like if I drop myself down to a level 20 and so I can only use abilities that I would have had at level 20, my macros are going to be all screwy. It depends how they scale the gear, because I think that when you look at the greens and stuff that you get from like doing Silverwood a free march, or even like the blues that you can get from the early planner rewards for doing rifts, you're seeing things like +8 intelligence or +2 wisdom on these items. I mean, if you scale a piece of gear down 90% and it's got like 80 strength on it, or say 90 strength on it, right? And you scale that down 90%, it's still got 10 strength on it, whereas other gear in that area would only have like 4 or 5. You know what I mean? So you still double the amount of stats that you would have if you had the gear at that level anyways, which I think is going to make it, to be honest, like insanely easy for a level 50 to scale down and do that content.
Well, they could just continuously nerf, how much your gear is scaled down. But I think the other thing they could do, and it's more along the lines of like giving other areas more, reason to go to them, is you can make it so, never mind the daily, you could just make it so that, I don't know, in Shimmer Sand Stimwell, you get, if you do a lot of participation, obviously, you get 2 Source Stones per step, and maybe Emerald it's 3. But that way, the daily, they can keep the daily the same, but then you're more, if you really want Source Stones, you go do an Embryo, you get 3 per, and Silverwood would be 1, or something like that.
So what, you would do your daily in Silverwood and farm the rest in Embryo? Because if you did that, then Silverwood IA would only fill up during peak times, and that's it.
Well, I mean, I think they're going to have a problem regardless, because there's going to be so many zones that it's going to be spread around, so no matter how you do it, you know what I mean? Like, there's too many, you're spreading the population too thin.
It's awesome that they're designing instant adventure for every single zone. That's excellent. I'm fully confident that Rift's population is extremely healthy and very profitable, obviously, because Trion continues to pump out better and better content, and if nothing else, regardless of how satisfied you are with the boss mechanics or the raid mechanics or the difficulty or the appearance of gear, when you think about, look at just like how the bosses move and how the zones look, everything is getting better. They're getting better technology. They're updating the graphics engine, which there's a whole thread on just asking them to get a new one. By the way, they can't. I'm pretty sure they can't, because switching the graphics engine would mean,
they could.
or the game engine,
it would take like a year of rewriting
they would have
code.
to redesign the whole game, written for that new engine. So that's not going to happen. But I mean, the game is continuously getting better. Trion's obviously making a good enough amount of profit to bring us all this new content. But even with that being said, I don't think that Rift's population is high enough to support this many choices for instant adventure, and I don't think that the population is high enough that there's enough new people to fill out like Silverwood without mentors going to Silverwood. I think mentors are going to have to participate in the lower level instant adventures in order for them to be fun and successful. Although they're not like a zone event, though, I guess I have to keep in mind too, because now I think about it a little bit more. I mean, I can almost solo Ember Isle once, and you can do 2 or 3 people and go through an instant adventure too. So it might not be as fun because it's not going to be on such a grand scale as like the zone events in Silverwood and Free March were when the game first came out. But it should be functional. The more I think about it, as long as there's at least a handful of players that are doing them.
Yeah, that I don't think you should look at it as something that should be always going on. Like, it's more like, oh, I do this for a couple hours, and because a lot of people want it to be something like you level all the way through instant adventure. I don't think it should ever be like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
they want it to
but
be a questing alternative. Like, instead of questing, you can just do
it should
instant
be something
adventure
to
the whole way
break
up.
up questing. It shouldn't be like your permanent, like, oh, I'm logging on, oh, I'm doing instant adventure all day. Like that. I mean, that's cool to think, but it's never going to be like that unless you want to be by yourself all day.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like doing a dungeon, for that initial quest experience, for doing the dungeon for the first time. You're not going to farm Iron Tomb at level 17, but you'll go in there at 17, 18, do it once, get the experience, get the weapon reward from the quest, and then you level up, move on to the next dungeon. I think Instant Adventure is probably going to be similar to that.
Well, speaking of dungeon, we also saw Empyrean Core on the PTS listing, a new 5-man. Me and Matt are extremely greedy. We want like 15 more, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, it's like just one? Really? Is that all we're getting? Just one?
And I'm really hoping that it has Master Mode already packed in, because I really like the Master Modes. I want more of them. My only concern is that if they implement another Master Mode, you're going to get even more Infernal Marks, or any mark for that matter, per week, so they might have to at some point limit that. But, that's... I think one more right now wouldn't exactly kill it. It'd be more down the road when there's 3, 4, maybe 5 more. They'd have to look into some system of limiting it.
Yeah, well, when you can get 36 or 34 or 38 or whatever it was that we came up with at some point, when you can get like 38 something, give or take, Infernal Marks a week, getting another 2 a week is not going to make or break that.
Yeah, we assume at some point, whether it's in an expansion or some mass update, they're gonna, it might not be like 5 at once. once, but it might at the very least be 2 or 3 at once, master modes. I think when it gets to that point and you're able to get, I don't know, like 50 a week, then, it'll start becoming a concern. But I think that's an easy fix. You literally could just limit the amount you get a week. You could just put the cap on like 40 or something.
Well, better yet, we were talking off air actually about the fact that bosses and master modes, we might have even said this in an episode, I don't even remember, but I do remember you mentioning this, and I thought it was a great idea, is that the bosses and master modes don't drop any marks. They don't drop plaques. They don't even drop plaques. Not even plaques. Like, really? So I can't even buy, like, PA experience with them. So all you get is the end reward. Your choice of whatever degree mark you want to pick up, which everybody's taking infernal marks. But so you get 2 at the end for finishing it, or 4 at the end for finishing it, but you don't get anything from the bosses. I think it would be great, and I wouldn't be surprised. So I'm quoting this now, so everybody knows I'm taking credit for this. If Tryon does it, I'm going to say I said it first, and you heard it first here on Overcast. There's going to be a master mode weekly, or like a master mode half weekly, where you can do any master mode you want, and you get your choice of like 6, like 4 or 6, and you can do that quest on Sunday and Wednesday when the master modes normally reset. So that way they can have as many master modes as they want, but you're not increasing how many of the top tier mark you get. And then so why would you do master modes then, more than, just do 1 twice a week? Well, make them drop marks. Make them drop the tier 1 marks, just standard marks of Ascension, so you can do master modes and farm out tier 1 raid gear. That's a good way to get people beefed up. I mean, seriously,
and they drop loot themselves. That's pretty decent. It's very comparable to tier 1 stuff.
Exactly, and it would create, once there was a lot more master modes in there, it would create like a whole nother kind of sub community. Like you have your 20-man raiders and you have your 10-man raiders. You kind of have like your master mode groups, you know what I mean? Your master mode guilds, where that's what they do for a challenge, which that would be perfectly fine. And with tier 1 raid gear, the master modes are fairly challenging. Darkening Deeps is pretty easy, but Caduceus Rise is fairly challenging if you're just in raid tier 1. So if that's all you got for a drop off the bosses plus their normal gear drops, that'd be great. And then you do the half weekly quest to get your top tier marks.
Yeah, and then I think eventually down the road, whether it's 6 months, a year from now, they'll implement another master mode, and now they can make that do like tier 2 marks or something. Once like tier 4 and tier 5 raids are out. So master modes never really have like they'll never end. You just add another one, and it's even more challenging. And like you said earlier, it'll be a separate. That'll basically be tier 2 master modes or something like that.
Yes, you just keep the master modes dropping like marks for 2 tiers behind kind of thing, which would keep people pretty caught up because you'd only ever have to catch up to a couple of tiers. So again, I ask, why do we need a level cap? There are so many ways for this game. They have so many things already implemented. There's so many methods to keep new players caught up without making them have to go through all the bullshit previous garbage content that nobody wants to do anymore. You don't have to do green skills. You just do master modes. Get caught up. Get you're a couple tiers behind, and then you can start 1 tier behind basically.
Yeah,
no problem.
Let's wrap this up. Next week, Matt will be leading the discussion because he's not a bitch.
Yeah, we decided that it might be funny to throw Joe into the fire and have him do the intro, and I'll play Joe. So that's, if you're confused at all, that's what you were hearing at the start there, as I was trying to portray Joe. So
that will be the poll question this week. Who would you rather in the discussion?
No, I'm not doing that.
Afraid to lose?
No, I'm not afraid to lose. I just don't want you to get discouraged when they all pick me.
Oh, okay, sure.
So that's all the time we have this week. Like Joe said, we'll be covering Conquest next week in episode 13, and Mythblaze will be here. Also joining us next week will be Kalendros from the forum, who was able to stream some Conquest from the first testing phase. Overcast is recorded every Wednesday and airs every Friday each week. We're always looking for new guests to come on the show and be a part of Community Voice, so if there's any area of Rift that you're especially passionate about or have extensive experience in, be sure to contact us with your desired topics. We're still looking for some more players interested in streaming Rift Live for our Twitch channel. If you're interested, simply contact us with your PC specs, availability, and what you want to stream. You can subscribe to Overcast on iTunes via the iTunes Store or the link on our blog. Also subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/RiftOvercast and on Twitch at twitch.tv/RiftOvercast. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/RiftOvercast and on Twitter at RiftOvercast. As always, we want to hear your questions and opinions on both the show and the game, so be sure to leave us a comment below or contact us through email at riftovercast@gmail.com, and we will see you next week.
Voodoo, one of the most, wow, I just fucked that up. Let's restart again.
Yo.
Because you completely fucked up my flow. Yeah, I hate you.